My name is Jahanara Saeed, Manager of Programs at the Women's Environment and Development Organization, and I'm here today chatting with some of my colleagues who are experts on gender-responsive climate policy and have been working to advance some key negotiation items within the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change. To kick us off, I'm pleased to invite WEDO's Executive Director, Bridget Burns, to contextualize this moment. Bridget, considering that we're 10 years post-Paris Agreement, what are WEDO's expectations for COP30?
The WEDO team is headed to Belém, Brazil next week for the start of COP30. Many things are at stake. This is the first COP really being held in the heart of the Amazon, providing an incredible opportunity to center the lived realities of folks in the middle of one of our most incredible areas of natural resources, one of those areas that is deeply under threat, and one that is deeply connected to particularly the lives and livelihoods of Indigenous peoples. It's also, though, a site of contestation, where even the host country themselves, who many hope will be a strong voice for global South and global majority leadership in the climate negotiations, is continuing its own dependency and investment in fossil fuels, as are many countries. We are now 10 years from the Paris Agreement. We are in a moment of countries submitting their NDCs. Not enough countries have submitted their NDCs, and we know that those nationally determined contributions show us to be well off track from what the promises of Paris were, coupled with a very disappointing commitment previously last year to what is really needed in terms of mobilizing climate finance. In the context of that, we know that there are many countries who are shirking their responsibilities to climate action, who are shifting into climate denial. And so there's a lot riding on what kinds of conversations and what kinds of solutions we're able to center in this COP30 that is upcoming. Gender equality is also fiercely under attack around the world, and it is one of the items that will be negotiated at COP30, the renewed Gender Action Plan. At WEDO, we've been working with parties over the course of the year to prepare ourselves for what backlash we might face and threats to the rollback of agreed commitments around human rights and gender equality. And one message that I would share and leave folks with is that for as bad as things feel in terms of regression and backtracking of commitments, there are many more parties who are deeply committed to standing up for gender equality, to holding the line on language around rights and equality, and to delivering a strong and ambitious outcome at COP30, particularly on gender equality. We see it as an opportunity to really advance our understanding of the intersectionality of the climate crisis in order to advance intersectional and effective solutions. You'll hear from other colleagues of our priorities around just transition and how a just transition can really deliver justice for people and planet, as well as what we can do to advance our countries' obligations around finance, and ensure that climate finance is truly accessible to those at the front lines whose solutions are ready to be scaled and replicated, and whose solutions are the only solutions that are truly sustainable to challenging this climate crisis.
So for this year's COP, what are we anticipating being discussed on gender equality, and what outcomes can we expect?
I'm going to speak from the civil society standpoint. So what we expect versus what we hope for, what we expect versus what might be the reality. So we're negotiating this year the Gender Action Plan. As mentioned, this is the implementable framework of the Lima Work Program. This is a very important negotiation because this Gender Action Plan really drives forward gender responsive climate action. And it really works as this like coherence mechanism, this ambition mechanism. It collects all of these mandates and gives a driving force to catalyze gender responsive climate action. So this year we're negotiating this key piece, and let's say that the expectations are varied. We've already had 2 iterations of the Gender Action Plan. So the idea is that this future iteration will be better. Probably one of the worst things that could happen is that this iteration is a more watered down version of the previous versions, because the whole purpose is that we're evolving with time within the UNFCCC. What we're advocating for within the WGC, within the Women in the Constituency, is to have a flexible, coherent, intersectional, inclusive, measurable, and resourced gap. So what does each of these pieces mean? When we're talking about coherence, we're talking about gender equality that is embedded across all aspects of climate governance, from constituted bodies, from finance, from technology, from adaptation. This should really grasp at that whole of society approach to drive gender responsive climate action. If it is coherent, it really can make sure that all these mandates are unified and that they have a place to be, and that they're giving those mandates to other negotiation streams and to other constituted bodies. Then we're talking about flexible. We're talking about a timeline this is going to be probably a 10-year gap. And this has to be flexible, and it has to be able to be able to adapt to the different circumstances that will happen between this in this 10-year time frame. Then we have intersectional. The only way this gap will truly drive gender responsive climate action is if it considers what it means to be a woman, what it means to be a gender diverse person in our world and in our society. So that means taking into account these different pieces that an intersectional framework takes into account. So gender, but also age, economic status, race, caste, like all of these different pieces that make up our identity. And these intersecting identities, it make our vulnerability more significant in climate change, or it can enhance also our capacity of being agents of change. So there's also that piece on intersectionality. We also have inclusive. Again, when we're talking about intersectional, we're also talking about inclusivity. The gender action plan should be reflective of all women in all of their diversity. And should also include some key pieces such as integrating women environmental human rights defenders, integrating just these different pieces that really make a gap more progressive, more robust, more complete. It has to be measurable. We need data in the gap. If we don't know what we're seeing, if we don't have the data to be able to say this is the impacts that we're seeing, or this is the change that we're seeing, then we can't actually have a gap that is informed and that will drive this gender responsive climate action effectively.
Oh, it sounds like a very meaty topic with a lot going on. So I'm wondering sort of what is being discussed at COP30 on just transition and what outcomes are expected.
So you're correct. It's a meaty discussion, and COP30 is going to be a juicy one. At COP30, we hope to finally take this work program from discussion and dialogue, which is the shape that much of it has taken. Unfortunately, at COP29 last year, we also didn't have a decision. And civil society, feminists, indigenous peoples, workers, environmental NGOs, youth, and other popular movements know that we finally want the Just Transition Work Program to start to deliver for communities and for people on the ground. And so there is this Just Transition package that we want to deliver, and we right now have a draft text that is a pretty decent one in the sense of how it mirrors these demands that are coming out of civil society. One big call from civil society and from many countries is for the establishment of a global mechanism on just transition, or the Belém action mechanism. So this acronym of the BAM that people might start to hear about and see as COP picks up pace. So the idea of this is that this mechanism is that it's an institutional arrangement within the UNFCCC, which maybe sounds a little boring, but it's to take all of this work that's happening globally on just transition, and there is so much work happening, but not necessarily so much sense made of it. And we see that there are lots of issues with just transition work that happens globally, like duplication of efforts, or struggles to access funding for projects, or kind of funding always being given to the same actors or institutions, because there's no real view of all of the different types of work that is happening. And so the idea of the mechanism is to make funding and technical support accessible, that we coordinate all these just transition efforts inside the UNFCCC and outside the UNFCCC. We look at barriers, and we use this as a space to discuss what are the different barriers that countries are experiencing to a just transition. And that we also have this help desk function, so that a country implementing its just transition could go to the help desk with whatever issue it is that they're facing, and the help desk can guide them to a mentor, somebody who has gone before and is doing really pioneering work on just transition, but not just the people who have gone before and are leading the way, but also to enable this kind of peer-to-peer learning and to do matchmaking with philanthropies or funders that may be able to fund that type of work, to act as a bank of best practices, to point them in the way of methodologies and things like that. And all of this surrounded by this global network of focal points or practitioners. So we want this to be really, really informed by the practitioners that are doing the work on just transition on the ground. And all within the principles of CBDR and equity. So having rights and fairness and support and inclusion at the center of that. So having this way to link what's happening globally to what's happening on the ground, and having what's happening at the ground really inform what's happening globally too, to finally have those threads become a little clearer. Then other things within the text are these idea of principles, just transition principles. What do we really need to see when a country is implementing its just transition? That's going to be discussed as findings from the dialogue within the text. We want finance for just transition, no debt-inducing finance for just transition, and integration of just transition into NDCs, NAPs, and long-term LEDs, which are lots of acronyms, but basically this idea again that countries need to embed just transition actions in their climate plans, basically. So it's all in the text, it's all up for discussion, and we'll see what happens. Yeah.
So what's at stake for COP30 when it comes to adaptation is many items, but in particular operationalizing the global goal on adaptation. We're 10 years past the Paris Agreement, and this is an opportunity in which there's been lots of work programs in place, and we're about to end a second set of work programs in which mandated experts were working together to determine types of indicators that are globally relevant and measurable when it comes to adaptation action around the world. And by adopting a set of ambitious indicators at COP30, then we're able to actually measure global adaptation. And it's essential and feasible that gender responsive indicators and other cross-cutting indicators under the dimensions, as well as the thematic targets, can be adopted within this new set of global goal and adaptation indicators. We also really think and believe that finance indicators should be able to measure any and all adaptation financing that is established at a national level. And so this means within this indicator process that there's an opportunity to not just measure where adaptation financing is coming from the public level, but also where it's maybe falling short when it comes to private financing. And I think this also continues to help us prove the point that public and grants-based and non-debt-making finance is essential for adaptation action globally. And we have a really strong opportunity to put that within the measured indicator process by adopting a set of indicators at COP30 that are ambitious and meeting the scale.
It sounds like climate finance touches sort of all of the work and all of the items being discussed. But I was curious, sort of at COP30, what will be discussed on climate finance and what outcomes are we expecting?
COP30 is following a big year. Last year was a finance COP. We ended up with a new collective quantified goal set for 2035. So this year, right before COP, we're anticipating this report to look at how that goal can actually be scaled up to mobilize $1.3 trillion by 2035. We'll be looking at how that report is going to influence the negotiations within the COP setting, particularly around the potential discussion on the provision of climate finance from developed countries to developing countries. That's a climate finance obligation. And unfortunately, this obligation has not been being fulfilled in any way, shape, or form at the depth and the scale that it needs to be. We're not seeing high quality climate finance being provided. So as we're following up on this new collective quantified goal, there's a real push to talk about what that means for developed countries in terms of their commitment to providing climate finance. We also have a really key agenda item that's been happening for several years of workshops to really think about how we align all financial flows with the Paris Agreement and its goals. And we want to make sure that when we are having these discussions, that this is not a way to put further burdens on developing countries
but instead to highlight the ways in which illicit financial flows, the debt burden, the unfair tax regimes that we have all been reducing the fiscal space for actually investing in climate resilience, in climate mitigation, in what we truly need to address the climate crisis. In addition to those issues of the provision of climate finance and aligning financial flows, there's a raft of periodic and or annual issues that are being addressed that speak to different climate funds and different processes that govern those funds, as well as the overall technical understanding of climate finance. So there will be something happening on climate finance every single day of COP in many different rooms. We will see how the usual climate finance negotiated items are also interacting with these bigger ticket follow-through items as we are figuring out how we're truly moving forward with the Paris Agreement to deliver on this new collective quantified goal and to align our broader financial flows with the Paris Agreement.
Thanks, Sarah. I can imagine like talking about money gets political very quickly. So what are the challenges and tensions that could risk weaker outcomes? And what's the threat if feminist advocates' demands aren't being met?
I think you already kind of hit on it in your question, Jay. It is political. And so the biggest challenge is that there is a lack of political will to deliver climate finance at the scale needed and the quality needed to truly address the climate crisis and to truly deliver on the promise of the Paris Agreement that climate finance would be scaled up in accordance with the science, in accordance with a growing understanding of the needs, which we now have 10 years into the Paris Agreement. So some of the excuses, of course, for this political will not being there are incredibly frustrating because we get the sense that governments are prioritizing anything but the people on the planet, which are the things that we have to have in order to have fulfilled futures and in order to uphold human rights in our world. So every time that this is framed as some sort of trade-off, that we need to invest in the economy or invest in people in a way that's not tackling the climate crisis, feels absurd. It feels like we are failing to put money at the root causes of so much of the inequality, so much of the injustice, so much of the human rights abuses and violations that we have within our world. Investing in climate mitigation and investing in climate adaptation and addressing the loss and damage that we're already seeing around our world is imperative if we want to really support human health, if we want to preserve our rich biological world and all of the services that it provides to help keep us healthy. We need to have a change in politics. And we also are hearing a lot, particularly this year, about the difficulties in this particular geopolitical climate and the uncertainty that it raises for governments to be providing, or global north governments to be providing that climate finance. But again, in these times of greater uncertainty and greater catastrophe, when we are seeing the effects of climate change ravaging our world around us, that's when the investments are even more imperative.